All right, today we're jumping into something pretty wild, a fascinating and frankly provocative theory from an author named Mario Arndt. He suggests that the history of the Middle Ages might not be what we think it is. Not at all. He argues that it wasn't some random series of events, but that it was actually structured, artificially, to follow a hidden blueprint.
And it all starts with a simple question that's actually really strange when you think about it. Charlemagne, Karl the Grosse, was one of the most famous, most revered rulers in all of history. You would think, for centuries, every king would want to name his son Karl, right? To tap into that legacy? Well, according to this analysis, they didn't. For over 400 years, the name Karl basically disappears from the royal families of Germany and France. Why?
You know, the common assumption, the thing you'd read in most books, is that the name Karl spread like wildfire. But Arndt's work presents a flat contradiction. He says that claim is completely wrong. And this isn't just some historical fun fact. For him, this is the loose thread, the one you pull that makes the whole tapestry start to unravel.
Now, to even begin to understand this mystery, we have to try and get inside the head of a medieval chronicler. The people writing our history books back then, they just didn't see the world the way we do. They saw a world that was divinely ordered, almost like a perfect geometric creation.
And that brings us to the core concept of this theory, history by geometric method. The idea is that medieval writers believed God was this sort of master architect, a great geometer, who designed everything, not just the planets and stars, but time and history itself with a perfect, beautiful symmetry. So their job wasn't just to record what happened, it was to show how events fit into that divine pattern. And this is a perfect illustration of how they thought. They saw these identical structures everywhere you looked. Space had 12 zodiac signs, right? Well, time has 12 months in a year. There are 7 classical planets in the heavens. We've got 7 days in a week on Earth. And just like Jerusalem was seen as the physical center of the world, Jesus was the spiritual center of all time. It's all about that perfect symmetry, that divine order.
So here's the crucial leap Arndt makes. This belief in a geometric universe wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea. He argues it was the actual blueprint they used to write the official histories of kings, of dynasties, of entire empires. They weren't just recording history, they were arranging it to fit the model.
Okay, so the theory is on the table. Where's the evidence? For the first major piece, we're heading to the Holy Roman Empire, which you can think of as medieval Germany.
Just for a little context, this period is dominated by 3 big dynasties, the Ottonians, the Salians, and the Staufers. Try to remember these blocks of time, because they're going to become really important in just a second.
And this is where a truly stunning pattern is said to emerge. The claim is that the list of German kings, for about 400 years, follows this incredibly rigid structure. Take a look. Each of these 4 sections starts with a king named Conrad. The second king is always a Heinrich. And the last king, also a Heinrich. A Conrad-Heinrich frame every time. Now look at the middle kings. The first block has 3 of them. The second has 4. The third has 5. And the last one has 6. It's a perfect mathematical progression.
But the names are just one layer of this puzzle. On top of that, there seems to be a perfect symmetry in the timing. The first 3 blocks of kings, they line up almost perfectly into 3 consecutive periods of 113 years each. And each of those 113-year blocks starts with, you guessed it, a King Conrad, who also just so happens to be the founder of a brand new dynasty.
So you have to ask yourself, could all of this be a coincidence? The repeating Conrad-Heinrich bookends, the perfectly growing number of middle kings, the 11 3-year dynastic cycles? Well, Arndt calculated the probability of just the name pattern happening by chance. The odds? He says it's less than 1 in 19,000. That's not random.
Okay, so that's one kingdom with a very, very strange pattern. But if it were just Germany, you could maybe dismiss it as a fluke. The theory, however, suggests this is not an isolated case. So now let's hop over to medieval France.
And what does the analysis show in France? A similar but distinct system. It covers a comparable amount of time, about 393 years. It's also based on these repeating blocks of time and a rigid pattern of names. But here, instead of Conrad and Heinrich, the key names are Philip and Ludwig, or Louis.
And the French pattern is almost beautifully simple and rigid. For over 260 years, from 1060 on, the French throne is dominated by this almost perfect back and forth. Philip, then Ludwig, Ludwig, then Philippe. over and over. It's like a metronome, ticking back and forth, which just seems way too neat for the chaos of real history.
But just like with the German model, the names of the kings are only the beginning. In the French records, there's supposedly an even stranger layer of symmetry, one that seems to completely defy any explanation based on random chance.
Okay, this is arguably the most startling claim of all. The names of the queens also seem to follow the pattern. According to this analysis, a queen with a name like Bertha, Maria, or Johanna was only ever married to a king named Philip. At the same time, queens named Blanche, Adelheid, or Margaretha were only ever married to a Ludwig. There is zero overlap between the two groups of names. How is that even possible?
So what are we supposed to make of all this? When you bring together the rigid name patterns, these symmetrical blocks of time, and even the names of the queens, the theory arrives at a pretty radical conclusion.
So let's recap the evidence presented. We have these highly structured, repeating name patterns in both Germany and France. We have these symmetrical time blocks that seem way too perfect to be an accident. The probability of it all happening randomly is calculated to be incredibly low. And then you have that bizarre symmetry with the names of the French queens, all of which seems to reflect that geometric, order-obsessed medieval mindset.
The final conclusion of this theory, then, is this: that significant parts of the history we've all learned are not an organic record of what actually happened. Instead, they are proposed to be an artificial construct, a story carefully designed by medieval chroniclers to fit their vision of a world operating according to God's perfect geometric plan.
And that leaves us with a final, really provocative question. It's a challenging idea, no doubt, but it really forces you to think about how history gets written. If it's true, if history was written to fit a perfect pattern, then how much of what we know is the actual event, and how much of it is just the script?